Hello, this is Angie Yingst, and you're listening to Centered, grounded conversations about the metaphysical.
So, one thing that you should know about me is that I love to do research. And when I was doing a weekly Q&A, which was like a live video at Hibiscus Moon for our students, they would post questions and I would research them and then bring the answers at the live. And I would also answer questions live as well. But I think I should admit to you that if I wasn't getting paid to do that work, I would have still done that work because I love to research things. And if you give me a topic, even if at the onset I'm not interested, by the time I've typed it in, I'm very interested. I start coming up with theories on my own. And then when I'm researching, I find new things and blah, blah, blah. Anyway, so I'm sure many of you saw this viral video by the troll Nick Fuentes. Now, one of the things is about this guy's, I've obviously come across his name. I don't really care what he has to say, and I don't want to discuss what he has to say, but he said a lot of misogynistic things. And how I really got, his video came across my feed was that I saw a lot of women responding to it. They would pull out the worst of the quotes and then say something like, "Why do men hate women?" Obviously, we can't answer that question. Misogyny has existed since we have recorded history. And that's the issue, right? Is that this is so embedded in our stories that we don't even see them as misogyny until you go into like a women's studies class or religion class and we start talking about it and pulling it apart and all of those things. So when we look at the stories of women, we also have to think about who was writing those stories, who's writing the histories, who's writing the religious texts, recording the oral traditions of a culture and religion are going to be based on the person that's most educated. And traditionally that has been men. So you're going to see those stories reflect a culture, obviously. So ancient religions and modern religions tell a story of women. And some of those stories are really misunderstood. And as we become more liberated, we got the right to vote in the United States in 1919. That's it's 100 years, but in the history of the world, that's not much, right? So we have to think about this story reflecting a culture, and as the culture changes, our idea of the stories change. So we can look at these stories now in a new light, and we don't see necessarily the bad women, but we see women who are misunderstood. So I have a sticker on my giant water bottle that says, "I support women's rights and sometimes their wrongs." So I'm going to say this. This is an episode all about women, what happened to them in our culture, and how our religions turn them wicked. So I'm going to start with ancient Greek religion. If you like it and you're interested, I do have an episode I recorded about Adam and Eve, Lilith, and the creation of the world via the Abrahamic traditions. So I kind of compare the Adam and Eve stories in the Bible versus the Quran, but I'm just going to say that I already recorded that, but I decided not to start there. I wanted to start with our ancient Greek religions, and the other episode was like 30 minutes of biblical stuff, and I was like, okay, who really wants to hear this? So if you do, let me know. But I would like to go into ancient Greek religion. That's part of my so my focus at university, so I studied comparative religion. Well, I studied religion, quote unquote religion, which is not theology. And I'm just prefacing, that's your disclaimer. About all these episodes, about all of my episodes, period. I talk about religion in a very disconnected way. So if you are, someone who has a lot of faith and you're hearing that, you might be like, oh, Angie's talking about this like in critical ways. And that's true. there are times I'm critical of all religions. And there's sometimes, I think there's beautiful, obviously, I think all the stories are beautiful in their own way, but for this stuff, I'm a little more removed. So I just wanted to let you know that, and I'm going to focus on ancient Greek religion in this one, and we're talking about the quote-unquote bad ladies of Greek mythology, and you'll see, are they bad? You decide. So let's start with who opens the box of evils in Greek mythology. Of course, it's Pandora. We know about quote-unquote Pandora's box. So, when we look at ancient Greek religion, I should just say that the gods are seen as more human than the god of the monotheistic religions. Why? Because the gods had their own dramas, and that was they were, showing us like different ways of being, right? So gods were seen as having human emotions and making mistakes, and they were jealous, and they fell in love, and they fell in lust, and they had greed and ego, and they're immortal, so they carry that through, right? So they would punish and smite or smote, or however you want to say it. So in the history of the stories of the gods, we see their emotions play out again and again and again, and particularly in the story of women in ancient Greek mythology, you see the men and women, the gods and the goddesses, fighting like they were human, okay? But, because they have unlimited powers, people die, humans die, and other gods and goddesses are punished. So, think about if you had unlimited power, you knew it, and you're an arrogant ass. Sorry, Zeus. But yeah, I mean, what would you do? Would you smite people? You got the rest of eternity. But anyway, let's start with Prometheus, and I know he's not a lady, but we're still going to talk about him because it sets the stage for some other things, particularly Pandora. So Prometheus is a Titan, and just a primer, and I promise I won't get too far into the weeds here, but in Greek mythology, there are the Olympians and the Titans, and they're basically two different generations of gods. And they fought a 10-year war over who would rule the universe. So the Titans are the older generation of gods who ruled the earth before the Olympians. And Titans were associated with the planets, and they were led by Kronos. Now, okay, Kronos... Oh god, there's so many stories of Kronos, but the Olympians were the younger generation, okay, who eventually took over and ruled, and they ruled from Mount Olympus. The Olympians, or the Titans, ruled from the universe or under the earth, okay? So the Olympians were led by Zeus, who we probably know. When we think of the Greek gods, we usually think of the Olympians, okay? So the war between the Titans and the Olympians is known as the Titanomachy, which translates to the Titan battle. Okay, so this war began when Kronos ate all of his children when they were born, because there was a prediction that one of them would defeat him. Okay, so he eats all of them. Zeus gets hidden away by his mother.
Hello, this is Angie Yingst, and you're listening to Centered, grounded conversations about the metaphysical.
Mother, Rhea, and so he comes out and basically frees all the siblings from Kronos' stomach. He also cuts off his penis and his nuts. Basically, there's some drama between Zeus, the king of the gods, and humanity. Humans had stolen fire from the gods. Prometheus was the one that helped with that. So Prometheus was like super clever, really smart, and really had this soft spot for humanity because he lived among humanity. In fact, he's often credited with shaping the first humans out of clay. So you can imagine he has this connection to humans. So after Zeus and the Olympians take over, humans are left helpless. Zeus won't let them have tools and fire. He doesn't want the Titans living among them. There's no way for humans to survive, and that's what Zeus wanted. So Prometheus kind of looked at this and was like, this isn't fair. Humans need help. Zeus was like, no, I'm the god. They have to be dependent on me, right? He wanted them dependent. He wanted them on their knees asking for help. So he refused to give them fire until they were basically begging him. Prometheus was like, forget it. So one night he sneaks up to Mount Olympus, which he can do, and stole fire from the forge of Hephaestus, who was the Greek god of fire. Okay, so Hephaestus does blacksmithing fire. He is the forge, and he is the son of Zeus and Hera, one of the sons of Zeus and Hera. Prometheus steals the fire, brings it back down to earth, hidden in a hollow fennel stalk. And fire changes everything. And that's another thing that I should mention, is that the gods and goddesses aren't omniscient. Like, they don't know everything that's happening everywhere at all time, right? Like, they can't say, like Hera can't see what Zeus is doing, which comes up later. But anyway, so when humans got fire, they could cook, they could stay warm, they could make tool and forge weapons, and they were thriving. Zeus was like furious because of this, and he saw Prometheus's act as a challenge to his authority, and to punish him, Zeus came up with the most brutal sentences in mythology, which is Prometheus is chained to a rock, and every day an eagle would swoop down and eat Prometheus's liver. And since Prometheus was immortal, his liver would grow back overnight, and then the torment would repeat the next day. So there's this exquisite painting at the Philadelphia Museum of Art called Prometheus Bound by Peter Paul Rubens, and it was painted in the 17th century, and it's one of my favorite to look at. It's absolutely beautiful. I mean, I love neoclassicism, and I also am a huge fan of Greek mythology, so like the two together, I'm just like, ooh. Anyway, it didn't stop there, and Zeus really wanted humanity to pay for accepting fire. Okay? And this is where Pandora comes in. She is the first lady of the wrongs. And I'm just going to go on record here to say Pandora was set up, but let's go. Okay, Zeus orders Hephaestus, who we just talked about, to sculpt the first woman out of clay. It just isn't any woman. The gods all chip in to make her obviously stunning. She's got lots of riz, and she gives they give her a lot of gifts. And what I mean by that is Aphrodite comes and gives her beauty. Hermes teaches her charm and cunning, so she's incredibly smart. Athena outfits her with wisdom and skill, and so on and so on. So each of the gods contributes something to woman. Okay? Now the powerful part of this is part of how women are seen. They are given all these different gifts by the gods and goddesses. So Pandora literally means all gifted. She is the first woman. Obviously, she also commits the first wrong, which, you know, we can see in the biblical story of Adam and Eve, right? The first woman, first wrong. So, plot twist. Along with her beauty and charm, Pandora is also given curiosity. And then Zeus gives her this wedding present, a jar. And I know you're thinking Pandora's box, but it's described as pithos in Greek, which is jar. So anyway, Zeus tells her, whatever you do, don't open it. Just such a classic god to human move. Yeah. So no explanation, no warning, just basically don't open this. As if, you know, that's going to keep her from opening it. So it reminds me of like the Simpsons episode. I don't know if you remember this, where Chief Wiggum says to Bart and Ralph, you know, you're not supposed to go into my closet. What is your fascination with my forbidden closet of mystery? I mean, who doesn't want to go into a forbidden closet of mystery? Who doesn't want to know what knowledge tastes like, or what's in the present you were given, right? So Zeus sends Pandora to Epimetheus, as part of his plan to punish humanity for Prometheus's theft of fire. So Pandora comes with this wedding gift, and Epimetheus, is the brother of Prometheus. And Prometheus is like, don't accept anything from Zeus. No matter what, don't do it. I'm chained to a cliff having my liver eaten out every day, so don't trust this dude. Everything comes with a price. And Epimetheus basically ignores the advice, which is what you can expect from a guy whose name means afterthought. But he ignored the warning when he saw Pandora. He's like, she's irresistible. I love her. You know, whatever. I know she's a gift from Zeus, but like, she's amazing, so I'm going to marry her. And then Pandora brought the infamous jar, which contains, you guessed it, all the evils of the world. She doesn't know that, of course. She just knows, do not open this. And life is fine. And Pandora cannot stop thinking about the mystery box, the, closet, forbidden closet of mystery, the forbidden jar of mystery. So Pandora basically gets nagged until one day she can't resist anymore. She lifts the lid and she unleashes chaos on the world. Every kind of suffering you can imagine: disease, pain, jealousy, hatred, death, all the evils spread out into the world. And they change humanity's peaceful existence forever. Okay? So in a panic, then Pandora slams the jar shut, trapping one thing inside: hope. And so while all the evils roam the earth, hope stays behind. It stays on earth. So no matter how much suffering humans faced, hope gives them strength to endure. So women are again blamed for unleashing trouble upon the world, or you can see it as being curious or seeking knowledge or wanting to know more. But the aftermath of this is just the hope. So Pandora's story is more about releasing trouble. The story serves as a moment in Greek mythology where, first of all, we're introduced to women, and then we're introduced to hardship. So the spoiler alert is these things always go together in Greek mythology, but the story of Pandora has been analyzed by feminists, obviously, through the years. And, it's really seen as, the first woman as scapegoat story. It definitely reflects the patriarchal fears of curiosity and agency and independence. Pandora's curiosity is seen as a flaw. It's seen as a direct challenge to faith. But, it also aligns with these cultural beliefs that women are responsible for humanity's suffering, which is why they should be subjugated. And you have to remember that. These are all justifications of why men are in charge and women aren't. So, those gender hierarchies are supported by these stories. And so when we have this place where we're unraveling that, this place in history where we're unraveling that, we're also looking at so is curiosity bad? Is disrupting the norm bad? That's how we change things, right? So this negative framing of Pandora's curiosity is really highlighting this kind of idea that women were basically discouraged from seeking education, seeking travel, seeking independence. And so even though Pandora's action is seen and has been traditionally seen as a mistake, feminist scholars interpret that in a different way. She is a curious, rebellious, too much woman, right? And I love women who are a little too much, right? Definitely support that wrong. So let's talk about Circe. She also is, in Greek legend, a goddess, quote-unquote goddess. She's a sorceress. She is the daughter of Helios, the sun god, and an ocean nymph, Perse. So the thing about Circe is she's seen as a goddess. Obviously she is. She's born of two immortals. But she's also called a witch or a sorceress because she had a way with magical drugs and incantations, and she often turned men into beasts for her entertainment or revenge, whatever floated her boat at the moment. Wolves, lions, swine. What do we think about that? Do we support that wrong? I'm still on the fence. I'm joking. These are jokes, people. But Circe's exiled to the island of Ai by Zeus. And the reason she is exiled is because she used magics in ways that gods feared. Interesting, right? Her first issue is that she turned the Scylla into a sea monster, which is told in Ovid's Metamorphosis. So basically, Circe fell in love with the mortal Glaucus. So they're always telling gods and goddesses not to fall in love with mortals, but whatever, they did. And he preferred the nymph Scylla, which is her, like, cousin, I don't know, sister, something like that. Half sister, maybe. In revenge, Circe uses magic to turn her into a multi-headed sea monster. And Glaucus had made advances towards Scylla, keep mispronouncing her name, and she's beautiful, and he's rejected. So Glaucus decides to pay Circe a visit and told her of his passion for the Scylla, begging her to make a potion so that Scylla would return his love. But Circe made a different plan. And this is how it's written in the Metamorphosis. I think it's chapter 14. To banish all doubt and distrust you may have in your power to attract, look into my eyes. I may be a goddess, the daughter born of the gleaming sun. The power of my spells and herbs may be great, but I pray that I may be yours. Reject the one who rejects you. Respond to her who pursues you. So Glaucus turns her down. He's still heartbroken over Scylla. Okay, I'm going with that. And told Circe that while Scylla was alive, his love for her wouldn't falter until the trees grew in the ocean or until seaweed sprouted on the mountains. And Circe was hurt by his admission, obviously, and knew she couldn't take her anger out on him as her love for him was too great. So instead she turns her wrath towards, you guessed it, Scylla, and mixes a potion using some plants, some chanted spells over them, and dons a blue sea cloak, leaves her home, travels to Scylla's sea pool where she liked to bathe, and poured her monster-producing potions into the water, spoke the spell out loud. So not long after, Scylla appears and goes waist deep, and then notices her lower half had turned into rabid dogs, and that she had transformed into this fearsome creature. So Glaucus wept when he found out what Scylla had become, and Scylla showed her hatred for Circe by attacking Odysseus and his men, who Circe had an affair with. And I don't know if it's an affair, but that's what we're going to call it. She also turned Picus, who was the son of Saturn and the king of Latium, into an animal. He was handsome and admired by everyone, and Circe was not immune to him and his charms, and she came upon him in the woods, and his beauty just like hit her, and she's like, oh my gosh. So she conjured up an illusion of a boar to get Picus on his own and ambush him. And then she says this, I appeal to you, Picus, she said, by your eyes which have captured my own, by your beauty, the most handsome of men, which compels me, though I am a goddess, to kneel at your feet. Be kind to my passion. Accept the all-seeing sun as your father. Don't cruelly scorn the Titaness Circe. But of course Picus rejects her, stating he's in love with Canon, the daughter of Janus, who's the twin, but Circe warned him that his rejection would have harsh consequences, and then she turns him into a woodpecker. A woodpecker. Okay. We're going to talk about Circe having been punished. So she gets punished. Basically, the reason is for using magic on another god. But what she also did was side with the Titans and the Titanmachy. So Circe's exile basically turned her into a really powerful goddess. She really honed her craft. She was taken to this really woody, wild island and she was exiled. So when people came to visit, she would turn them into lions and wolves. And so they basically protected the island because everybody was afraid of them. So Odysseus visits her island, which is the Ahi Ahi, A-E-A-E-I, or A-I-A-I-A. Wait, A-I-A-I-A, A-E-A-E-A. How do you pronounce that? I don't know. I'm saying I. How's that sound to you guys? So basically, Odysseus visits her island, and he's protected by this herb called moly, it was given to him by Hermes, because Hermes, they're like, the gods are trying to protect Odysseus, okay? But Odysseus pissed off Poseidon, so Poseidon keeps blowing him all over the place, so he's gone from his home for a long, long time. So basically, he gets blown to the island of Ai, which Hermes can't do anything about. So this is the thing, the gods and the goddesses will do stuff to humans, but another god can't undo it. Okay? Or they can't undo what they've done. So they'll give them the protection, right? So that's what happens. So Poseidon blows Odysseus to the island of Aiahi, where his daughter lives, so that he can get turned into some animal. And basically, Circe is like, I'm turning these men into pigs. So you can kind of imagine their behavior on this island. And the only one that doesn't get turned is Odysseus. And he kind of compels her to turn them back, which she does. But he then stays with her for a year as lover and basically husband. Now, Odysseus has another wife. And at some point he leaves. But there is an amazing novel by Madeline Miller called Circe, which is one of the books I wish I could discover for the first time again. She also wrote The Song of Achilles, which is all about the story of Achilles and the Trojan War. Also a very interesting book. So, the story of Circe I find very interesting. I think a lot of modern witches and earth medicine practitioners love the sorceresses, the Hecates and the Circes. So the next kind of goddessy figure is Medusa. We all think we know her story, right? She's a Gorgon with snake hair who turns men into stone when they look into her eyes, but she wasn't actually born a monster. Her story comes through from Hesiod's Theogony, which gives one of her earliest accounts, and then Ovid's Metamorphosis, and she's also in the Odyssey, and she's just all over ancient art, from temple carvings to shields. But Medusa wasn't this snake-haired, petrifying figure that we think of her as. She was one of three sisters called the Gorgons. They were daughters of the sea deities Phorcys, and Ceto. Unlike her sisters, who were mortal, Medusa was mortal, but she was considered incredibly beautiful. And when we say mortal, it probably isn't the same kind of mortal as you and I. She probably could withstand a lot more than we could. But things take a dark turn when Medusa catches the attention of Poseidon, the god of the sea, and he begins to pursue her. In Ovid's Metamorphosis, we're told that Poseidon violates her in Athena's temple. And what is meant by violate is she was raped in Athena's temple by Poseidon. The thing is, she was a priestess of Athena, and when you were a priestess of Athena or any of the virgin goddesses, it meant you remained chaste. You were a virgin, and you stayed that way your whole life. This is one of the only traditional roles in Greek society where women were autonomous and free. Where they weren't subjugated. So if you became a goddess of one of the virginal goddesses, so that's Athena, Artemis, and Hestia, and Athena is called Minerva in Roman. In Roman, Artemis is Diana, and Vesta and Hestia are the same goddess. Okay, so like each goddess channels her energy into a domain without distractions of romantic religions when they're a virginal goddess. So they become these symbols of independence and power because they have rejected marriage and motherhood. Okay, so then you have these cults around them, and it's just very, very interesting. So back to Medusa. Okay, instead of punishing Poseidon for raping Medusa, Athena turns her anger on Medusa. And we can all relate to that if you've seen one episode of SVU, which is, the courts are constantly punishing the woman who reports the rape, not the rapist, right? Or protecting the rapist, not the woman who reported the rape. So Athena curses her by transforming her hair into writhing snakes and making her gaze so terrifying that anyone who looks directly at her would turn to stone. So Medusa, once a stunning and innocent priestess, was now a monster, and she fled to the edges of the world. She didn't want to hurt people. She lives in solitude, but her story doesn't end there. Of course, one of the targets for the hero Perseus, she was hunted basically, and he was tasked with bringing her head back as part of a quest. That's awesome, right? Who would freaking do that? Armed with a mirrored shield from Athena, Perseus approaches Medusa without looking directly at her, using his shield for her reflection, and manages to behead her while she's sleeping. And even in death, she wasn't done with her wily ways. Her head is kept and used to turn people to stone, but also to turn. She frees. I think she basically frees Andromeda, who was being fed to a sea monster, and I think Perseus is given Andromeda's hand in marriage for that, and then ends up giving it to Athena, who was trying to exact revenge anyway. It's a whole other story that I don't even cover the things that Athena, Artemis, some of the other goddesses do, because they aren't considered the bad women. They're considered the good women because they follow the rules. So he ends up kind of putting her face on his shield, and she becomes the Aegis, the shield for many heroes. So basically, when we interpret Medusa's story, we can really see she's kind of a tragic figure, right? She's punished for being raped. She's punished for being beautiful is really it. And being beautiful and not giving that beauty to men. You can kind of see it that way too. But her blood is also used, by the way, for magical properties. So when we tell the story of Chiron, he is got the Gorgon blood, is what gives him the incurable wound that he has in his ankle, his Achilles. But anyway, Medusa is seen as a power symbol, a symbol of women's anger, our rage, the trauma that gets demonized. And now you see lots of tattoos and stuff of Athena's head, because she is seen as a symbol of protection. Let's not let this happen to us. We may have been violated or sexually assaulted or raped, but we wear this as protection that you can't do this again, right? So we kind of know that men don't actually have the power to repress us. We have to be complicit in that repression, right? So that's part of the kind of power of these myths and stories. So when we start dismantling them and saying, there's nothing inherently weak about us, there's nothing inherently uneducated about us. So she becomes more than just a mythical monster now. She becomes the symbol of resilience and rage and feminine power. It's a lot of transformation. So is she the most misunderstood female character in ancient Greek mythology? Maybe. She's definitely in the running. Medusa has been interpreted by Freud as a symbol, a repression of fear of castration in little boys. And I think, she's now like Freud, whatever, dude. Medusa is considered, for me, and for many of us, a symbol of female rage against gender-based violence. She is all animal, after that. And she's the one who can kind of stop people in their tracks, right? So even though she's blamed and she's the victim, we can kind of resurrect her and think of her as not evil, but misunderstood, So there we go. Even the Queen of the Gods. And I'm going to talk about a traditional goddess, Hera. She's the goddess of marriage. She appears as one of the most petty and vengeful mythological characters, punishing women Zeus would cheat on her with. And that's sort of how I've always remembered her, as this goddess that's sort of just like the nagging wife. And the truth is, she was a spurned woman. She torments Leda, the mother of Helen of Troy, and keeps her from giving birth anywhere on the planet. And at the same time, I think we can think of her that way, and we can also understand. So based on archaeological evidence, it's always boring in the paragraph after this, but I'm just going to go with it. It seems evident that Hera originated in the pre-Greek Aegean area. So she was a goddess of the earth before she became the goddess of marriage in Greek religion. So, in part, we know this derived from iconography, legends, obviously the archaeological evidence, that she was considered an earth mother goddess, the mistress of animals, the queen of the heaven, and the female origin of all the things. And so she ruled over the earth and the sky, and she did not have a male consort. Okay, so she was the goddess of women. She was the goddess of the 3 stages of women's life: maiden, mother, crone. So indicative of what she is, she kind of had this idea of parthenogenesis, or virgin birth. So before Zeus, she gives birth in this parthenogenic way. And according to Homer, she gives birth to Hephaestus and Hebe in this way. So there's this idea that she didn't have sex when she had them. And that happens before the Mycenaean invasion. And so Herodotus reported that Hera was an indigenous deity who was associated with agriculture. So she exists there before Zeus does. Interesting, right? So because the pre-Greeks surpassed the Mycenaeans in farming, Mycenaeans adopted Hera as their god, as one of their goddesses. So over the next few hundred years, Hera changes. So she becomes basically the greatest of gods in that pre-Greek Aegean area into this disempowered, quarrelsome, naggy wife, and she's used as a foil against Zeus. So in Greek mythology, she is the daughter of Kronos and Rhea, and in this one, she just is there. She's always been there. So Hera was the queen of Olympus. Her rank surpassed all the other Greek goddesses. She was eaten alive by her father Kronos and then rescued by her brother Zeus, which I already mentioned, but she was one of the most worshipped and respected goddesses in ancient Greek, and partially because she was the one they prayed to at every wedding, through every marriage. She would be the one that would be called upon. So her story actually begins with a forced marriage because Hera kept rejecting Zeus's passes. That's her brother. She refused to marry him, and Zeus was relentless. So finally she, has to relent. And the reason she has to relent is because Zeus transforms himself into a cuckoo bird, and he conjured a huge thunderstorm, pretends he's injured and helpless, like he's this little helpless bird that she finds, and she brings the bird into her arms, and she's trying to warm it and protect it, because she has this goddess of animals reputation. And then when he's being held by her, Zeus transforms back into the god and rapes her. And then Hera, ashamed of the violation, knowing her place in Greek society, and I hate to say it that way, but that's the way it was seen. If you were raped, you were going to get pregnant, you needed to be married. So she agrees to marry Zeus, and that's exactly why Zeus rapes her, is so she has to marry him. So in the end, she's forced to marry and then witness all of his infidelities without complaining. But she complained. And that's part of her medicine in some ways, is the fact that she won't just let it happen. She won't turn a blind eye. She's the protector of the she's a protector of the sanction of marriage. So she had to protect her marriage. And what she did, instead of punishing Zeus for rape, she punished the women who were raped. Not the best approach, but this was a really unstable foundation for their marriage, as you can imagine. And from that point on, Zeus's lust and Hera's jealousy are like constant sources of stories in Greek mythology. So Hera was meant to represent this ideal marriage, and then has this like horrible marriage. Zeus cheats on Hera with mortal women, with men, with goddesses, and all that stuff. But let's talk about some of the goddesses' more heinous crimes, or more the worst of her crimes. So the tale of Io. This is Hera's first priestess, and although Io spurns Zeus and all of his advances, she ultimately is powerless to resist Zeus. Part of it is probably because he threatened her, but let's not go there. So in competing narratives, either Zeus transforms Io into a heifer, obviously to hide her from Hera, or Hera turns her into a heifer. Does not stop Zeus. She also fastens her to an olive tree, and then because she is petty as fuck, she sends a glad fly to pester and mercilessly bug the shit out of Io. So another of her targets is Semele, the mother of Dionysus by Zeus, and Hera disguises herself as a nurse. She encourages Semele to ask Zeus to reveal himself in all his divine, like, she's like, how do you know that you're having an affair with Zeus? Like, make him show his full self, right? And she does that because she knows full well that no mortal can see the god in his full divinity, because she would die. It's too bright, too whatever. But Zeus does manage to, so like basically he says he'll grant her one thing, and she says she wants to see him, and he said you shouldn't do that, you shouldn't want that, and she said that's all I want, and then basically she dies. What Zeus does then is save the child, sew him into the leg, and give birth to him that way by pulling him out of his thigh. That's why I always say it looks like my son was pulled out of the thigh of my husband, because they look exactly alike. But anyway, so and Dionysus is the god of wine and all that stuff. So the next to fall prey to Zeus and Hera is Callisto, who is a nymph, and Callisto becomes pregnant with Zeus's child. We don't know if Callisto is willingly or unwillingly doing this. Probably willingly, the way the way it's written in what I'm reading here. But of course, Hera transforms her into a bear. There's the Princess Alcmene. She's described as the tallest and most beautiful of the mortal women. She becomes pregnant with Zeus, and Hera tries to prevent the birth by tying her legs in knots. Yeah, it's just that's the mother of the Greek god Heracles. So that's the thing. So okay, so then Heracles is born, and if that weren't enough, then Zeus tricks her into nursing the baby because he's suckled by he suckles the goddess. The infant grows strong and fierce and a god, basically a half god, a demigod. And then Hera figures out who the child is and throws the baby off her breast, basically throws the baby, and the milk that splatters over the sky forms the Milky Way. That's how the Milky Way gets formed. So then, this is the thing. So then she gets so mad, she sends 2 snakes to kill Heracles, but now he's like a super baby, and he strangles them and uses them as toys, their dead bodies as toys. It's legendary. Okay, so you can see that literature and Greek mythology have treated Hera pretty poorly. So, what can I say? Is Hera like a petty, vindictive woman? Yes. Is she driven crazy by her husband? Yes. So, okay. So one thing to understand is that, Hera is treated poorly, and part of it has to do with the history. So the Mycenaeans invade the Aegean region basically in the 18th century BCE. So before that, basically the Mycenaean Greek dominated the 18th to the 11th century BCE. They were kind of called the first Greeks because they were the first ones to use that language and to write down their stories. Okay? So, one of the things about what they invaded, it appears to be the native queen, the native goddess-dominated culture being subjugated by the Greek. Does that make sense? So in the Iliad, which is one of the oldest written stories we have of humankind, Hera's strength is demonstrated by her clashes with Zeus. She tries to favor the Trojan army. She's constantly involved. She's trying to avenge her name based on Zeus's slights and his affairs and his subjugation, or attempted subjugation. So, in the Iliad, we're seeing basically these fights against Hera and everyone, right? In fact, the whole Iliad starts with Hera and the narrative that we often talk about as the judgment of Paris. So Paris was the prince of Troy, and he basically gets embroiled in this kind of chaotic incident. Somebody throws a apple or something in the middle of Mount Olympus. All the goddesses are there, and it says, "To the most beautiful." And so Paris picks it up, and he has to decide which is the most beautiful of the goddesses. So there's Athena, Aphrodite, and Hera, and Paris selects Aphrodite. And the reason is because Aphrodite promises him Helen of Troy. Helen is already married, one, and married to um, Menelaus, which is he's a son of the House of Atreus. So Paris insults Hera, which fuels her hatred of the Trojans, because Paris is from Troy. And so Hera defies Zeus's order and collaborates with Athena, who also was slighted, to provide the Greeks every advantage. Hera was unable to avenge herself for Zeus because she was subjugated by him. So they start a war. Nice, right? Hera had attempted and has attempted to overthrow Zeus in a number of stories, and obviously it always fails, and then in retaliation Zeus torments her. So it's just this constant back and forth with Hera, married to this toxic friggin' dude. But, you know, I think one of the things is to remember that all of these goddesses have very complex stories. There's not one that is just like bad from the start. You can see how their stories of trauma and subjugation and pain end up being what takes them into this arena of Greek mythology, right? Where the women are bad and the men are good, even though the men are doing bad things. So, we see Hera over and over again, both covertly and overtly being defiant to her husband. And that's part of the medicine she brings forth now. And that can be really important to remember. So anyway, that's kind of the story of the Greek gods. I have the story of the Greek mortal women and how they are treated in Greek mythology. I also have the story of the Abrahamic traditions, and we're talking about the creation myth, Adam and Eve, which is called the fall, and the role of women in religion, if you are interested in hearing about that. So I hope you enjoyed this episode, and I'll be back soon.